how to interface and how to cut. So I do have some interesting stuff. I hope that you find it interesting anyway. Little tips and tricks that I use, and a little bit again about how I do things. So hopefully it helps you. If there's things that I wouldn't have thought of that you guys would like me to explain to you, please let me know and I will be happy to do a little demo on it. So have a good night, and I will see you later. So I guess kind of the first part is that we're going to be doing the cutting and interfacing. I prefer actually to do it the other way, interfacing and then cutting. It saves some steps. They say that necessity is the mother of invention. I actually think laziness is, and I'm kind of lazy that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut really roughly. I'm not too worried. I try not to be too wasteful, but I'm just going to kind of give myself a little bit of room, and I'm going to cut this whole thing out. Two things that are usually laying on my ironing table are, first of all, my pressing cloth. Just a cotton cloth that I use a lot of times, especially working with vinyl or leather. I lay this over top. Even with, if this was leather, I would have this layer, do interfacing, then lay my pressing cloth over, and then do it all. The other thing is this little Teflon mat. The Teflon mat is actually really awesome for if you're interfacing smaller pieces and stuff like that. If you cut your interfacing or your piece and your interfacing, and if your interfacing hangs a little over, you get it on your ironing board, you can get it on your iron, and it just kind of makes a mess. This Teflon, I can feel that there's a little bit of glue on here, and all I would actually have to do is just wipe it off, and it actually comes off on my fingers. If you have a piece of interfacing, fusible interfacing that is kind of wrinkled and gross, so what do you do with it? You can actually put it glue side down on here. Give it a quick press. It doesn't mean you have to like really iron it, but give it a quick press enough that it would flatten out. And even if it sticks to this, you can just peel it off and you can reuse the interfacing. It works perfectly. So I've got my main body, the outside piece on my ironing board, and I have my kind of rough cut piece of interfacing. This is the Presto Firm that I'm using. I will be using this probably throughout my whole bag, other than where I use the heavier stuff like the Peltex and the foam. Now this is an industrial iron. It has a gravity feed, so it has a big water bottle. I just have to fill that up every several months. Don't have to do that really very often. The great thing about the industrial irons is that if you need steam, you have steam. And it comes out forcefully. For as long as you hold that down, it'll come out. A little trick that my sister taught me, she went to Olds College and took fashion merchandising and had her own designing and custom sewing business in a little town called Camrose, where I grew up. She taught me this trick because interfacing very often tends to shrink. So I'm going to leave my iron off my interfacing, but kind of close. And I'm just going to give it a real good steam. It's not stuck down, but that was hot enough that, and some smaller pieces, I've actually seen them shrink, and they can shrink up to, depending on how big it was, up to 1/4 inch. So now I'm just going to go ahead and do my pressing. Sometimes I'll use a pressing cloth even over top of the interfacing like this. One thing about the Presto Firm is it takes a little bit longer, a little bit more, especially around the edges and stuff. sometimes to really adhere properly. So now I'm back at my cutting table again. This is where my templates, that's why I kind of went into a lot of explanation about these plastic templates. But this way, I've already explained what they are. I don't have to do it again. Put this over top, over my rough cut. Everybody's probably seen these. They're the air soluble or air erasable pens. These ones, I'll give you another little tip. I think we pay about $6-ish for them a piece. For the, I won't even name the brands, but they're expensive and they don't last very long. And that's what really aggravates me about it, because I don't think I should be paying $6 for a pen. These ones I ended up ordering on AliExpress, AliExpress. Just go online and find them. Put in purple air erasable pens and they'll come up. There'll be lots of vendors. These are $6-ish around here, and I got them for about 25 cents a piece. I ordered 50 of them, a lot of 50. I do quilting, so it's helpful that way too. But I couldn't beat the price. So it was like 50 of them, sure, that's awesome. And they work as well, if not better, than the more expensive brands. So this is what I'm going to use. This way, well, it doesn't really matter what you use. You can use a pen because none of it is going to show. I just prefer the felt. So I'm just going to go ahead. I have my template. Actually, you know what? And I'm gonna, while I'm here, I'm gonna have to mark it with something other than the air erasable because it will erase. So I'm just gonna use a pencil. And I'm gonna mark, this is where my snap is gonna be. So at least I have the mark there. I can also punch it out if I want. It's gonna be covered anyway, so regardless of how I do it, you won't see it. So now I'm just going to go ahead and cut it out. I will very often just use my ruler for these long straight cuts as well, and just cut the corners. And there I have my main body piece. So I'm just going to explain my thought process or my planning process for cutting out the main flap, the outside. I want to fussy cut this little girl. So I know that this is the piece of the front, the middle of the front panel. I know that I want her on here. Now I have this extra piece laying here because this is going to be my contrast. This is going to be roughly about the size of what my contrast piece is. So by laying it on there, I know this is my seam allowance. It doesn't have to be perfect, but at least it gives me a good idea. Now if I fussy cut right here, I'm going to end up cutting off her boots, or at least my contrast piece is going to cut that off. So this line right here is actually the fold or where it kind of folds over at the top. Let me get the XXL. This line right here is roughly about right here, where this flap folds over and it's no longer flat right here. So I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of this going up over the flap, which really is, or over the fold, which really isn't a big deal because I really want her boots. I want the little chick here, a little bit of the puddle, all of that. So that's where I'm kind of gonna plan on. I can remove this because I have a pretty good idea of where I'm at right now. And I'm just gonna make sure that I feel like everything is really centered. And wherever I'm happy with it, that's where I'm gonna mark. Of course, I had to move it there. And everything can be cut except for the front curve. This is a little awkward, probably looks a little awkward too because I have my tripod in the way. So that's going to be the center of my front flap. So this is where my Teflon mat comes in really, really handy. So I have my front flap. All I did was I laid this on my interfacing, cut it out, did a pretty good job of it, but I don't know necessarily that I have every little speck. And I don't clip out my seam allowances. So if I'm going to use my good piece as a template, then my interfacing is going to be basically the same size. So I lay that on. I don't have to worry about anything getting on my ironing board because even if it overhangs a little bit, the glue is going to just get onto the Teflon, not on my ironing board and not my iron. So again, I'm going to steam it. And you can put a pressing cloth over top if you want. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I like to just check my edges sometimes, make sure that things got really well glued. I can see there, kind of on the inside, that it didn't. Should let that cool down before I play around with it. And there I have my middle piece.